The NFL Combine will have plenty of defensive talent for the Indianapolis Colts to hone in on with so many needs for the stop troops. So who should Chris Ballard keep his eye on and focus in on for Lou Anarumo's charge in 2025? Which prospects can boost the defense in Indianapolis the most? And which stop troops do you, the fans, get the most excited about to see at the Combine next week? Well, let's talk about it. Welcome to the Horseshoe Huddle Podcast presented by Indianapolis Colts on SI.com. Part of Sports Illustrated. I am Drake Wally, the deputy editor for the site, and of course, I'm joined by none other than Noah Gebert, fellow analyst on the site and co-host of this one and only podcast. Noah, this is the side of the football I'm most excited to talk about when it comes to the Combine, because there's so many needs for this team on the roster, and you have Lou Anarumo in here now. He's going to have a say in who they're looking at the Combine. He's going to have a say in who they draft. But yeah, man, I'm excited to talk about this just because there's so many different positions that they need to address.
Yeah, defense, I think, is the biggest need going in. Maybe you're not thinking defense is the highest priority because really you got to get that offense and Anthony Richardson sorted out before you can really tackle anything else. But yeah, defense is going to be huge. You can really go down every position group on that defense and think, okay, we need some changes, some upgrades, some whatever there, either because it's people's contracts expiring or impending cuts that might happen, or just plain there's not a lot of depth there or some underperformance in the years past. So yeah, just going through every position group. And then on top of that, you've got your new defensive coordinator coming in this year, which is always going to shake things up. Depending on how he feels about the current personnel, which on defense last year underperformed in a lot of areas. So definitely could see a lot of shift there and a big focus on adding some new blood to the defense.
Yeah, and apologies, everybody. I absolutely botched that intro. I was thinking for some reason it was 2 years ago when we were part of the Fans First Sports Network. So sorry about that. But yeah, man, we've already got Sean Conkrights in the chat. We've got Spooks Hill Joe, Warren Howard, and Scataboo. And then, of course, we've got the one and only Truett Trussler, cornerback, linebacker, tight end. This one's going to be all about the defense. So we're going to talk about our defensive players to watch here. Real quick, before we even dive into this, let's talk really briefly about what the Colts defense did or didn't do last season. So there were games primarily against lesser opponents where you saw the defense play pretty well, and then you'd get plenty of turnovers, like against the Broncos. I think they had 3 interceptions, but eventually everything just caved in on this team. And I think without question, the 2 games that stick out the most, and neither one is good, but it's the New England Patriots when you had Drake May as a rookie on not a very good team that was struggling to move the football, diced up the Colts, and then you've got Drew Lock, who goes out there and literally has a career game with the worst team in football offensively. How did you feel about this team last year defensively? I know that there's bright spots on this team for sure, but overall they just really underperformed and kind of left a lot to be desired under Gus Bradley.
Yeah, just so frustrating, I think, is the big word there, because you can tell there were some games last season where they performed well, and it was really the offense that was holding them back from getting the wins. It seems like every time they go up against what should be a mediocre to bad offense, they perform really poorly. And a lot of times when they're going up against top 10 offenses in the league, they perform really well. So it feels like they're playing down to their competition or playing up to their competition, depending on who they're going against, which maybe be a leadership issue. Maybe that was something that was common with Gus Bradley and the 2 years that he was here as the Colts defensive coordinator. So, I mean, just good to get some change in there. I feel like you have some players at some positions. You definitely need upgrades, but just getting change up at the top with the defensive coordinator position hopefully can kind of swing that momentum around.
Yeah, and it was a much needed step in the right direction. I think that this is going to be a really good. It's at some point, hopefully, it's going to hit the ground running with this defense, because I mean it can't really get any more roller coaster than what it was last year. So we're going to go ahead and dive right into this, and we're going to snake these all the way down. We're going to start with maybe. I mean, it's definitely one of the most important. I'm not 100% sure if it is the most important position, but if it's not, it's probably second most important. And we're going to address safety. This one is one of my absolute favorites. I loved watching him last season. in college. He played for Notre Dame, absolute dog of a safety. I think he played 5 seasons there. He's also a winner of the Nagurski Award, which is the most outstanding defensive player, and that's Xavier Watts. Xavier Watts. I'll just go ahead and I've got my trusty notepad here, old schooling it up. So we got a 2-time All-American here, 13 interceptions, not in his career. In 2023 and 2024, he had 6 and 7. Those could be interchangeable. I can't remember which year he had 7, but 273 return yards. Okay, and a return touchdown. Of course, he was the 2023 Nagurski Award winner. And then you're talking about 134 tackles, again, in 2 seasons, the last 2 of his career. This is a guy that you're probably going to be able to pilfer in the second round. He's not going to be a first rounder, more than likely. Could be, who knows? Maybe somebody's going to take a late flyer on him in the late first round because they're like, we cannot take a risk on this guy falling into falling to another team. If the Colts don't like something, maybe they, dare I say it, no one's going to like to hear this, but maybe they trade back and maybe they take Xavier Watts late in the first round because they're like, hey, we can still get this guy and we also recouped a couple picks. What are your thoughts on Xavier Watts? I personally think that he fits exactly what this Colts team needs. He would be an immediate starter. He'd be plugged in right there with Nick Cross. You'd be talking about, you've got a guy who's going into his 4th year in Cross who is still younger than some of these guys coming into the draft and going into the combine. I'm excited to see what he's going to test at, how he's going to perform in the drills. I just think that he should absolutely be gathering the attention of all the scouts for the Indianapolis Colts.
Yeah, I think he's a name that certainly to watch. There's a lot going on in terms of how people are projecting him, where they're going to rank him, and it's super early in the process. I think a good reason that you included him on this list to watch in the combine is to kind of see where that stock falls after these next couple of weeks play out. See if he's leaning more towards that first round range or that second round range, which I think both are in play for him. I know PFF, some other big boards have him around 30, 40 right now. But Lance Zierlein of NFL.com, who actually is pretty close with Chris Ballard. I know they don't always see things in terms of how they evaluate the same way, but he's got him as safety 1 right now ahead of Malachi Starks, which seems to be the consensus for most people is that Starks over Watts. And the comparison for him that Zierlein had that I thought was pretty interesting was Malik Hooker, as a guy who Chris Ballard drafted with his the first year that he was the GM here with the Colts was that play at 15 with Malik Hooker. So I could see it happen if this weekend goes well or next week goes well with Xavier Watts and he performs well, then I could see that stock going up.
Yeah, and some of the things that really stand out about him, reading his draft profile here, his evaluation profile, nasty closing burst to the football, especially when playing downhill. He arrives at the mesh point like he was shot out of a cannon. Shows a serious dog in coverage situations, refusing to concede positions and battling through contact at the catch point. And then one thing that really stands out to me is advanced mental processing. It allows him to bait quarterbacks into mistakes. He plays chess while others are playing checkers. I just love that. And it's like, this is a guy who takes the football away. He's a ball hawk. And you want that at safety. You kind of got it with Nick Cross last season. He had 3 interceptions, but he's a strong safety. If you can get more of that from Nick Cross and you can bring in a guy who plays the ball so well like Xavier Watts, man, oh man, you're going to be thinking twice about attacking that team deep. You know what I mean? And Lou Anarumo, his defense is predicated on the play of his safeties and cornerbacks. And this is a move that really helps him. And he can develop this guy right out of the gate. I just think that it's addressing so many things. If there was one thing that does concern me, it's something that is on his weaknesses here, and it's that he can get over aggressive pursuing plays, occasionally taking angles that leave too much space for cutback opportunities, basically meaning that if a guy's going this way and he's coming this way, he's trying to meet him, he might overshoot and the guy just cuts one step and goes the other way. And you saw that at Notre Dame. He's just he's like a ball of explosiveness, and he's just going to go right to the ball carrier. But I think this is a great play. But moving on to the next one here. Now, this is a position that some people believe the Colts might have already kind of locked up, despite what happens with a certain free agent right now. But you need more depth at this position. I think that you might even need to try to draft yourself a starter at this position. Noah, go ahead with your first one here.
Yeah, so this is going to be Jahad Campbell, the linebacker out of Alabama, who's, I think, getting a little bit of play. Like people talking about him maybe moving to edge rusher just because he's 6'3", 244. I guess the combine's going to come into play here when you're kind of measuring out that wingspan, his arm length, to see if that's somebody you can put on the edge. That 10-yard split when he's running the 40, just trying to test that explosiveness, that bend when he's doing those three cones. You're going to be paying attention to just to kind of see. But for the most part, I mean, he split time a little bit, was right around 120 snaps on the D line last year at Alabama, and then mostly are like around 650, or the rest of his snaps were off ball. So he's primarily at this point an off ball linebacker, which I think would be more kind of what the Colts are looking for. But huge, what I mentioned, 6'3", 244. That guy being an off ball linebacker, I mean, that's like classic throwback Ray Lewis style linebacker that you've got back there, which is rare in this league, but surprisingly pretty good coverage skills for being as big as he is. He's a great athlete, which is why people are even considering that he may be able to rush the passer on the edge. Yeah, just getting him in that will linebacker spot beside Zaire Franklin, kind of letting Zaire Franklin handle the cerebral parts of the job, being the green dot and the play caller and kind of that read and react guy. And then you have Jahad Campbell, that can be this guy you can send on a blitz, just kind of run and hit kind of player. And I think that would play to his strengths really well.
Yeah, and something that really stands out to me on his profile is coverage instincts are advanced for a converted edge player. His interceptions against Georgia showed exceptional route recognition from zone drop. So, I mean, this is a guy that's very versatile. He's going to be able to do a lot for you. And again, we're gonna be talking about this ad nauseum.
Mm-hmm.
When you have a scheme like Louis Anarumo's that is ever changing and ever evolving, and it's adjusting to whatever the offense is doing, sometimes by quarter and half, you need a guy who can do this. Who's to say that he doesn't put him in coverage and then just say, hey, you know what? Let's throw a wrench in their plan and let's put you on the edge. Like, I mean, you can do so much with him. And also, he kind of had a slow start, if you will, to his career at Alabama. But it was the 2024 season that stood out.
Mm-hmm.
You have 5 sacks, you have an interception, you have 2 passes defended, 2 forced fumbles, a fumble recovery, 117 freaking tackles, 12 for loss. Okay, the guy did everything. He literally did everything in 2024. Do you think that this could be an EJ Speed replacement? Potentially with a higher ceiling.
Yeah, I would say immediately that's someone you slot in at the starting linebacker spot where EJ Speed currently handled last season. I think this is a plus upgrade, somebody who can do a little bit more than what EJ Speed could do. I think you trust him a little bit more in coverage. I think you like him rushing the passer more than you did with EJ Speed. And you just kind of have to see if that run defense is what the level that he played at Alabama, if he continues to bring that to the NFL.
Yeah, and I love this one right here. So Campbell's player comps, Peyton Wilson, Junior Colson, Edgerrin Cooper, we loved those guys last year, and so this would be getting that back. And then this one right here, his usage at Alabama, particularly in simulated pressure packages, showcases a dynamic defender who can wreck offensive game plans from multiple alignments. It sure as hell sounds like an Anarumo guy to me. So I like your first one there. So then we're going to go ahead and snake right down to Noah's next one. Now we've got so many players at these positions in the defensive secondary, and that's not giving away anything. It could be either corner or safety. But this is one of the top at his position. It's a guy that everyone's been talking about might be the best at his position in the draft. It's going to be really fun to watch him at the combine just to see what he does in the drills, what he does in the testing. Go ahead, Noah.
Gotcha. So I've got Nick Emenware here, the safety out of South Carolina, and he's somebody that I think he's going to slot more into that strong safety role that Nick Cross is in currently, but maybe just kind of at a premium there. I think that maybe that's Nick Cross plus, or kind of what you were hoping that Nick Cross would be his rookie year when he came out in that strong safety spot. So I'm not sure if he's necessarily going to be in the Colts' plans, because that's not the safety spot that they're immediately trying to upgrade or get a replacement for. But I mean, we're talking combine watch list here. This is like my number one to watch at the combine. He's 6'3", 225 as a safety. He's going to run so fast. He's going to jump so high. He's going to be like, I don't forget what year it was that Obi Melifon move came out of UConn as a safety, but was just putting up freak numbers in the vertical jump. I think they said something about how he jumps around 45 in the vert, which is huge and which is crazy. So, I mean, I'm not going to rule out maybe trying to upgrade at Nick Cross's safety spot. And try to maybe go back to your original plan of moving Nick Cross around and seeing if he can work at free safety or seeing if he can take some snaps in the slot. Nick Cross performed over expectations, especially what they were at the end of training camp last year. But I don't think that necessarily means that you are happy with where you're at and you're sticking put and you're not taking the opportunity if you find someone Nick Amenware who maybe after this next week he jumps up to that first round conversation or that second round conversation. If you see a guy sitting like that available on day 2, I'm not saying that that's going to be your primary thing, but if you see a guy sitting like that available at day 2, I think there are worse ways to go than taking somebody you think would be an upgrade at safety, even if it's Nick Cross's spot. The defensive backs were such a rough unit overall. Just adding talent wherever you can, I think, is a good idea.
Yeah, and look, man, this dude didn't really play too much like a strong safety. I mean, he had 4 freaking interceptions and had 2 return touchdowns in 2024. He had 2 more interceptions in 2023. He only played 11 games. And then in 2022, he still had 85 tackles. I mean, this dude has done nothing but produce throughout his entire college career. And it's kind of like Patrick mentions right down there. I'm looking at NFL Draft Buzz right now. He's the top rated safety. I mean, and when you look at his profile, I mean, my goodness, they've got him. I mean, these are going to be a little bit different, right? Once they do the official combine measurements, 6'3", 227 pounds, runs a sub 4.4 second 40-yard dash. I mean, he's got good tackling, run defense, coverage, zone, man versus press. This is a dude who really could absolutely make Chris Ballard water at the mouth. Because he's going to test out of the freaking atmosphere, and he's going to have, kind of like Patrick also mentions, that relative athletic score. Expect it fully to be over 9.5. I wouldn't be surprised if we're talking 9.8, 9.9. And one of my favorite things about him is that they have got, quote, nasty striker in run support who plays downhill with bad intentions, consistently punishing ball carriers who dare enter his territory. Man, oh man, if it could work, with Nick Cross at free safety, this would be a home run selection for the Colts. I still think that it might be a possibility he's in the first round, but if he sneaks into that second round, I just can't imagine the first couple picks, somebody's not going to pick him.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to watch what happens next week. I didn't even realize that some places were ranking him in the first round. But I guarantee you a lot more are going to after this next weekend because it's just going to be numbers that make your eyes pop.
Yeah. And so we'll go ahead and move on here. Already almost at the 20-minute mark. We've covered 3 guys. But this is the first one at his position that we're going to be addressing. And it's one of my favorite stories just because I believe he came from Amazon, actually. He was working at Amazon, and then he gets promoted at his college as a starting defensive back, starts showing plenty of promise, and then he goes down with an ACL tear, but he's still one of the top most intriguing guys. And I think that the injury history and the story and everything, and just the way that he played football is going to really make it intriguing what he's going to do at the combine. And that's Siobhan Ravel Jr. This guy right here, I mean, was one of my favorite to take notes on. Bounced back from an ACL tear, long and physical, has fantastic speed for somebody his size. 2 interceptions in just 3 games in 2024. Okay, the guy he did nothing but go out there in a very limited capacity and played well and forced turnovers. And then you're talking about 13 passes defended in 2023 before he, of course, had that ACL tear. I mean, this is a guy that still has, he's got like first round prowess, and East Carolina, say what you want about that, type of competition. They're not out there playing the best of the best, but this dude can only play who's in front of him. And he played fantastic football in his limited capacity. What are you expecting from this guy? I think that this is a dude that absolutely could be a Colts player. I understand the injury history. I get it. But sometimes when you have when you've got this kind of talent, he's going to have to show it at the combine, right? He's going to have to show that that's not limiting him at all. But I just think that this guy screams Indianapolis Colt.
Yeah, first off about Siobhan Ravel, I'll just say I had this thumbnail made 2 days ago because I knew I was going to talk about Siobhan Ravel. I saw you throw him on the spreadsheet earlier today. I'm like, okay, I'll talk about another corner that we're going to be talking about later that I'm still excited about. But yeah, I
That's
mean,
right.
I noticed you put him down so early, and he was my first on the board, so I know he was somebody that we both really wanted to talk about. Just getting into that, I mean, there's a couple of thoughts there when you're talking about Anarumo and the kind of corners that he's employed in the past. They've been tall, they've been fast. That's exactly what Siobhan Ravel is. Listed at 6'3", 193. We'll see how he weighs in and what his actual height is. But either way, he's that lengthy corner that's going to have the prerequisite size, the prerequisite speed that Anarumo looks for in the defense, and he's going to have a higher RAS that Chris Ballard is always looking for. So those are the way those two are going to mesh. You can see, I think there's going to be consensus on him going forward. And then you're also talking about in the past guys that have been taken with that kind of profile that are long, fast, with some injury history, and those kind of guys haven't really worked out for the Colts in the past, and they've kind of burned Chris Ballard as draft picks. People like that, those are just high RAS kind of freaks, and maybe worrying about how that takes a toll on their bodies and maybe not weighing that so much because you got to be on the field to play. But I mean, there'll be extensive medical rechecks. I mean, in terms of the medical checks that go on, that's why it's stayed in Indianapolis for as long as it has, the combine, because the facilities are so close. The doctors and the medical staff there at the IU Health Center that they use down there are so respected. So you're going to get some good opinions, second and third opinions on that knee and his whole body going forward. So if you feel comfortable with the medicals, then that's definitely somebody I could see them taking a chance on.
Yeah, and there's plenty of reason, and you got to be honest here. There's plenty of reason to be concerned. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, he had the injury. He lost so much playing time in his final season, and a couple comments here really do stick out. Ravel is also 6'3". That's a Ballard
Yep, yep.
cornerback height for sure. And then we've got Indy 86 saying the obvious, man. Not knocking the guy, but really don't need any more injury-prone players. I can promise you that's going to be something that every single cornerback needy team that thinks that this guy is promising to even look at during the combine,
Yeah.
even if he tests out of the water and looks fantastic, everyone is going to be asking themselves, when we pick this guy, if we pick this guy, is that going to be something we have to worry about? Because ACL isn't the injury it used to be, I will say, but it's still a very prominent, one of the worst that you can sustain. And this one's actually really interesting. Some of his comps: Sauce Gardner, Christian Gonzalez, TJ Tampa. You know, that's
The
fantastic.
third
You're
one's a
talking about
return there, but
yeah. You're talking about at least the first two are proven guys that you're looking at as potential, or not even potential, but as future stars at their positions in
mhm.
the NFL. So Siobhan Ravel, we'll have to see. It's going to be a really awesome combine altogether for the cornerbacks. But I'm very very intrigued, and so is Noah, on what we can see from Siobhan Ravel, because he's going to have a lot to live up to, and this is going to be his opportunity to at least at first show it for all these teams.
Mhm.
This next one. I was really torn on which like player I would pick for this position, just because there's so many talented guys. Full disclosure, it's linebacker, but that doesn't give away anything. But I feel like this guy really sold me at the Senior Bowl. That's where he sold me big time, was during
Mhm.
Senior Bowl week. Was able to really show out of nowhere that he could be one of the top linebackers taken in the draft. And I'm really intrigued to see how he's going to test at the combine. And that's Jeffrey Bassa from Oregon. Now, Jeffrey Bassa really, really had consistency throughout his career: 48 tackles, 62 tackles, 72 tackles, 54 tackles. But the thing is, man, the guy did a little bit of everything. You've got interceptions, you've got sacks, tackles for loss. He even showed athleticism after the ball is in his hands. Returned one in 2023 for 45 yards for a touchdown. again, he really showed what he can do at the Senior Bowl during Senior Bowl week. A couple things that stand out about him. I mean, he is going to be a little bit on the shorter side. He's a little bit on the lighter side, but he's got a long
Mm-hmm.
wingspan. He's going to be able to move at least fast enough as a defender, but he does everything well. I'm not saying that he stands out at any certain thing, but natural defensive quarterback. Listen to that. Natural defensive quarterback who processes pre-snap alignments and communicates adjustments with veteran savvy, exhibits quick twitch lateral movement and closing burst when working in space against outside zone concepts. Basically, he's not going to get blown out of proportion when he's trying to seal off an edge and when he's trying to attack a ball carrier. And then he shows natural feel for timing and angles as a delayed blitzer. And telling you, Louis Anarumo is going to salivate over a guy that he can use as a delayed blitzer where it's going to fool a quarterback. He consistently presses gaps, affecting quarterback launch points. I love this pick. He's going to be, let me see here, he's going to be more of your third or fourth round pick, probably. But I think that might be where the Colts pick a linebacker. So what are your thoughts on Bossa? What are your thoughts on, what he might be showing at the combine? I don't think he's going to blow anyone away potentially at the combine. He's more of a cerebral guy, more of a technical guy. But I love this pick. I think the Colts need to be watching closely.
Yeah, and I do think he'll test well. I think he'll test within that requisite of what Chris Ballard kind of looks for typically when he goes after linebackers. Love Senior Bowl guys also, so that's another feather in his cap that might have the Colts kind of steering their eyes towards him. We have had a couple of linebackers. This is the second one if you're counting Jahad Campbell. I think this guy, Bossa's more typically that linebacker fit. Like, it's not a conversion for the position. He was a safety that converted to linebacker, which is also kind of what Chris Ballard has looked for in the past, namely Jalen Carlisle from last year. You've got that convert, so he's going to be do well in coverage. And I like that the Colts are in this position where they've got that weak side linebacker spot opening up. If they don't retain EJ Speed, like we don't expect them to. And you've got Zaire Franklin manning that Mike spot to kind of be the guy taking those calls, like we mentioned with Campbell. And you free up a young linebacker to bring in and kind of be that run and hit guy and kind of show off his playmaking ability like Bossa has. So I think he would slot really well into that weak side linebacker spot.
Yeah, and this is a position where it seems like it's Zaire Franklin's and Jalen Carlisle's for the future, right?
Yeah.
Like it just seems like everything is lining up where EJ Speed does not necessarily. I'm not saying he's a one trick pony because he's not, but the guy is mostly a run defending specialist.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I think that you just need more completeness. Zaire Franklin, he can blitz, he can cover at least a little bit, and he is more of the tackling, volume tackler. Whereas Jalen Carlisle, I am so high on that guy. I think that he could potentially be a star. Just everything he does. This is a guy that you're going to slot in as that third guy on your linebacker depth chart. He's a guy that you could put in when you do have three linebackers, and I think that he could help give offenses fits. And he's a very smart football player. He's going to do a lot of things well. And you know what? Sometimes you need that from a guy that's going to be a third or fourth round pick. But it's going to be interesting to see how he performs at the combine, because the guy just does so many things well. He's like right across the board, nice and even keel.
Mm-hmm.
So the next guy that we're going to be talking about, it's yet again a massive position of need. We're going to go back to two straight here for Noah. One of the top guys at his position. It's going to be somebody that's going to probably go pretty early if the Colts decide to go defense, which inevitably I completely assume that they're going to with their 14th overall pick, unless, of course, they get Tyler Warren or address Tyler Warren and try to trade up to get him. I love this guy. I thought that he showed absolute dog mentality. Go ahead, Noah.
Yeah, this is Will Johnson, cornerback out of Michigan. This was actually my pivot when you took Siobhan Ravel. It's like, I'm okay with going with Will Johnson here. Just excited to talk about him. Just another guy that I think fits the mold really well as that tall, lengthy corner. I think a theme, spoiler, we've got one more corner coming up later in the show. But with all of these guys that we're going to talk about, just kind of funny looking at their snaps by position that they logged in college. Almost all of them were exclusively outside corners, which I think is funny that we tended to lean that way, since they've got their slot long-term slot, probably in Kenny Moore locked up, and we expect him to kind of thrive in Anarumo's defense. So we're mainly looking at those outside corner spots. All these guys are going to be 6'1" plus, over right around 200 pounds, physical. The one issue that Will Johnson might have is that long speed. A lot of people have been a little bit concerned around the NFL about what his long speed might be, to the point that they're not really even expecting him to run the 40 at the combine, just so he doesn't have to put a number on that and he can kind of stand on business with the tape that he put. Because the tape that he put out last year at Michigan, especially, was great. He's just going to be a shutdown guy on the outside that can play in both man and zone. But yeah, you're thinking maybe around a high 4.4, maybe sneaking into the 4.5. Some people were even projecting based on his game tape of what his 40 time would be, which wouldn't really fit with Lou Anarumo in the past. But who knows? Maybe he comes out, he runs high 4.3s, something like that. That really surprises some people, or maybe he just kind of stands on that film. Because as it stands, he's projected to be a pretty high draft pick right now.
Yeah, lanky, physical. He's going to be a guy that's really going to fit what they're trying to do. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that, you're talking about like on his combine profile, rare blend of size and fluidity. Maintains backpedal integrity against shifty receivers while using that frame to bully smaller wideouts at the line. That is just freaking awesome. Brings running back physicality to tackling, steps downhill with bad intentions, constantly wraps up with proper form. What did we talk about last season constantly with this Colts defense? Missed freaking tackles. You're not going to get that with Will Johnson. Okay. And something that really stood out to me also is scheme versatile difference maker who, or scheme versatile. Scheme versatile difference maker who thrived in both press and zone looks, projects as a day one starter in any defensive system. That is awesome. And he also only had 2 interceptions last season, but they were both for touchdowns. And then he had 4 the previous year, 3 in 2022. In 2023, when Michigan won the championship, he had 4 passes defended and still returned 1 for a touchdown. I mean, this is a guy that is an absolute monster. And he's a coverage specialist, and he didn't really he didn't get asked too often to tackle in college. And I really assume it's just because quarterbacks weren't targeting him very
Yep.
much, or they were trying to keep the ball away from the guy because they knew what they were dealing with here. I think if you're the Colts and Tyler Warren is off the board, or who knows where the Colts are going to go here. If Warren is sitting there on the board, I fully expect them to take him. But if they really think, man, we can't pass up on another cornerback here, because you got to think that depth chart is, boy, is it light. I mean,
Mhm.
Juju Brents is the biggest question mark on this team outside of Jelani Woods. Okay, maybe Anthony Richardson, so he might be third, but those first 2 are massive question marks. Then you're talking about Jalen Jones, who, by all regards, is the best outside corner on the team. In fact, he is the best outside corner on the team. And then you've got a slot corner in Kenny Moore. Now, he only played 6 games last season, but it just shows what he could do in those 6 games. 2 defensive touchdowns. It's a guy who is going to play football. He's going to really fit in with that Anarumo scheme well. Do you think that he could outright be the best outside corner on the team if he's drafted?
Yeah, I don't think it's too hard to beat. As much
It's
as I
fair.
love Jalen Jones at the point he is in his career, I think he's an average starting outside corner. I think Will Johnson has the potential to be a difference maker come in day one. Even if Tyler Warren's still on the board, I would say Will Johnson's probably the better overall player at a position that's going to make a bigger impact than tight end is for your offense.
Yeah, and look, you can't skimp on cornerbacks anymore, man. I mean, this is going to be a position that they absolutely have to do something about. I know that Chris Ballard actually mentioned it in his press conference. He's like, we have to be better.
Mhm.
We have to be better at cornerback. But this next one, I'm really, really intrigued by. I really like this pick from Noah. It's definitely a savvy pick, and I think that it's one that you might. This is a guy that I think is going to make a pretty big impact in the NFL. Yet again, we've got another linebacker, but that doesn't give away anything because I know that there's multiple guys that could fit what Indianapolis is looking for at this position. Noah, please roll it out.
Yeah, so this is Jalen Walker, the linebacker slash edge defender out of Georgia. Uh, just look at you. We talked about Jahad Campbell earlier and how he was kind of this hybrid guy. Jalen Walker's even more so. It was pretty close to 50-50 where he split his time between on the edge or off the ball as a linebacker. You would think that edge defenders are going to make a little bit more noise than off-ball linebackers in terms of the impact that they have on the field. So maybe if you're taking somebody this high, I mean, he's going to go probably top 10. Maybe he falls to 14 for the Colts. Um, I think even Dane Brugler of The Athletic had him at number 3 overall on his big board that he just recently put out. But I mean, there's going to be, you have to know what to do with him, right? You have to have a plan. And I think maybe it's not the worst thing in the world if he falls to 14, if you just take him because he's a freak athlete on defense and on a defense that needs some reinforcements, and you figure out what to do with him later, right? If he ends up being a good pass rusher for you on your team and you pick him at 14, that's not the worst thing in the world, even though you just spent a pick on Latu last year. I mean, you've got other guys to make a decision on. You've got Kwity Paye, who's going to be on that fifth year option that he's playing on. That's going to be the final year of his contract there. We'll see what they do with Ebukam, whether he stays on his current contract. That'll only be 1 year remaining on that contract, or if they move on from him, they've got the decision to make on Taekwon Lewis and the savings they could have if they move on from him. They have a decision to make on Dio Adengbo. So while edge seems like the position they need the least on defense, you would kind of think that rolling into it. It's really not as deep or as long term as it seems like it might be.
Yeah, and look, man, I love this right here. So run defense grade was 62.3, coverage at 67.5, which, given the fact that he was also playing edge, that's pretty impressive, right? You know, like that's a guy that can do a lot of stuff for your defense. Missed tackle rate at 12.1. Again, you're talking about an edge rusher as well. So the fact that he didn't miss more tackles is pretty impressive. And he really took off. I think it was 2023, even though he only had 20 tackles, 6 for loss. He had 5 sacks. And then you ask him to go back in coverage at times in 2024. He had a couple passes defended, 6.5 sacks again, a guy that just plays all over the field. He had 37 of those 60 tackles were by himself. And then some of the things that really are his his profile is awesome. And I think he's going to show a lot at the combine. He's going to show that versatility. But he's a natural block destructor who uses powerful hands and leverage to keep himself clean, particularly effective when working through traffic, which that's awesome. That's a guy who in the fray of all of it, he's going to come through and he's going to be in that backfield. A high motor player who consistently affects the quarterback, evidenced by his team leading pressures against Kentucky. And he also takes on blocks with excellent pad level and leverage, consistently maintaining position, making plays in the run game. Now, he's still developing his instincts as an off-ball linebacker, which is occasionally showing hesitation when diagnosing run plays, and he can get caught a little bit too square against offensive linemen, meaning he's going to get his ass kicked. You can't keep yourself too square against an offensive lineman as a linebacker, but he is a guy who has played off the edge. So this is a dude that I'm really intrigued by. I think that he's going to be, the only way the Colts take him is if they feel like, hey, we can address linebacker and edge depth, with him. And maybe any other players they had above him on their big board are gone and they're sitting there at 14. I mean, I don't think that you can really pass this guy up. He's arguably the top linebacker, especially going into the combine. It's going to be really interesting to see how he plays out. But this next guy that I've got, it's a position that isn't sexy. It's a position that doesn't really get talked about a lot. You need depth here. You have a couple of starters that are arguably the best duo at what they do and the best duo in their position. And this is Tyleik Williams from Ohio State. Now, Tyleik Williams, the thing that really stood out to me is just his absolute massive size. He at one point weighed like 360 pounds. Okay, and this dude has trimmed himself down to I think 325 or something. Mm-hmm. So he's trimmed himself down. But this guy's massive. Yet he's athletic and fast for his size. 28 tackles for loss, 10 passes defended in his career. Powerful, efficient, and he also has a high football IQ. You're talking about probably an early second rounder, maybe mid second rounder. But look, man, if the Colts, address something in the first round and they really don't want to take depth behind Grover Stewart and DeForest Buckner lightly, this is a guy that they could pick. And also, you do have to start thinking, sadly enough, because the NFL is so unforgiving, that 30 is the age where you have to start looking at them like they're geriatric and senior. And I know defensive tackles can play well into their mid-30s. Some guys are playing 36, 37, but you have to start thinking about the future at this position. Raekwon Davis wasn't it. Taven Bryan's probably not it. As a defensive or a depth piece, you're probably not going to sign him to another 1 year deal. This is how you look to the future in that position. How do you feel about this? I know that you could probably honestly address a lot of the depth on the defensive interior and free agency with some veterans. You might even be able to sign a couple. But how do you feel about this? I think that it fits what the Colts are trying to do if they're willing to take a guy a little earlier than what I think a lot of people think they might take an interior defender.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are going to see just defensive tackle and scoff at that a little bit just because, hey, we've got Grover Stewart, we've got DeForest Buckner. They're going to be 31, both of them going into next season.
Yeah.
2 years on their contract, I think, going into this offseason. So you've got it depends, man. Like, it depends on how Grover Stewart works out this season. There's definitely an out in his contract after this year where you have the opportunity to move on and save quite a bit of money and make yourself a little bit more flexible for the future. And behind DeForest Buckner and behind Grover Stewart, you've got Adebawore, who hasn't really shown much as a defensive tackle, like really in that rotation for any period of time. He's made some splashes on special teams, but as far as defensive tackle, you want something a little bit more reliable in that rotation. You're immediately getting a guy who, clearly they value that third defensive tackle spot with the amount of money that they paid Raekwon Davis last offseason. So I wouldn't be surprised if they spend a second round pick on that defensive tackle spot and got a guy that can immediately take reps, because the third defensive tackle gets a lot of snaps in this defense. Taven Bryan and Raekwon Davis both had around 350 snaps this past season. If you've got some guy like Tyleik Williams, maybe he's going to be a little bit more limited because he's on the heavier side. He might be somebody who you don't really want on the field on passing downs. So maybe he's spelling Grover Stewart and DeForest Buckner early on first and second down when it's a running down. I think, yeah, he would kind of fit that role that you thought Raekwon Davis was going to fit. And just given the investment that they gave him last offseason, this wouldn't be strange for me to see.
Yeah. And, one thing that Patrick Rye really nails here is he might run a 40 about as fast as Addy Adetomo Adebawore, if I had to guess. He'll impress guys at the combine. Absolutely. I think that he's going to show out. This dude – this is NFL Draft Buzz, so you're going to get your official combine measurements, but they have him 6'3", 327, 4.5 second shuttle, a 31.5 vert, and a 4.68 second 40. Being 300, Adebawore was like 280 or something and ran a 4. Yeah. This is a man who's over 300 freaking pounds, and he could potentially run under a 4.7 40-second yard or 4.7 second 40-yard dash. That's absolutely wild. So that means if he does get past the point of attack, you're talking about a guy who's going to wreak havoc in a backfield, and it's his run defense that stands out the most, which we saw. Look, say what you want, even the most diehard, if they are out there, Raekwon Davis, Taven Bryan supporters, my goodness, those guys couldn't defend the run to save their lives. I think Taven Bryan was far and away better than Raekwon Davis, which, no offense to Taven Bryan, that tells you how bad Raekwon Davis was in his first season in a Colts uniform. So this is something that has to be addressed at some point, whether it's with Williams and you do it early, or you do it a little bit later in the draft, or you do it through free agency. You got to get a run defender. And I think that you would rather have a run defender on your interior than a guy like Stewart or a guy like Buckner who can get to the quarterback. So it's going to be interesting. I think that like Patrick mentioned, he's going to absolutely shine at the combine. He's going to blow a lot of people away. But I'm going to go ahead and get to my last one here. And we were actually able to move along in this episode. This is one of our fastest episodes for sure. But this one's going to be my final one of the day. And yet again, we're addressing the defensive back position. This is a guy that was converted from the offense, right? He was converted from the offensive side of the ball. He does not have a wild amount of experience on the defensive side of the ball, but I'm very intrigued by his athleticism. I'm intrigued by his ball skills. He takes that knowledge and he brings it over very well to the defensive side of the football. And that is my last pick here as a guy that I can't wait to watch at the combine, just given all of his experience in multiple positions. And that's Darian Porter from Iowa State. Darian Porter, fantastic speed, converted wide receiver. Oh, that just sounds fantastic. A converted wide receiver over two defensive back. This guy had 3 interceptions in 2024, 6 passes defended for his career. He did not play that much, and he still had 3 interceptions. Okay, the guy is going to play the football very well. He understands quarterbacks. He understands how to read the eyes. He understands how to break on routes because he used to freaking run them. This is a guy, he's a long cornerback who can disrupt passing lanes with his wingspan and just with his frame. And he's got great cornerback instincts for a guy that doesn't have a lot of experience at it. Now, the biggest thing is he's going to be a study in that position because of that lack of experience. That might be the one thing that's going to hurt him, but he's going to be available in probably your day 2 rounds. And I just think, man, if the Colts somehow, if they draft a cornerback in the first round, I wouldn't even be mad if they double dipped and got another cornerback like Darian Porter. I think this is a home run hit. I know that it sounds crazy, but I think that what Lou Anarumo can do with this guy and how they can develop him, I just think that he's a raw ball of potential. Could you miss on this guy? Absolutely. Is it a little bit risky? Sure. But I can't wait to see what he's going to do at the combine because he's going to have the feet of a wide receiver as a defensive back, and he's just going to have – it's the ball skills, man. It's the ability to break on balls. He used to catch them. He used to run to get open. He used to fight defensive backs to get open, and then they converted him over, and he played great as far as coverage standards are concerned. What are your thoughts on Porter? I just think that the Colts need more at cornerback, man.
Yeah, I mean, for sure they need more at cornerback. And I think after this next week, watching him go off at the combine, I think he's going to run really fast. Landon Zerline, NFL.com, we mentioned him earlier, and his ties to Chris Ballard compared him to Reek Woolen, which is something you really like to hear, and how Woolen came in his rookie year and made an immediate impact. And then you're talking about a guy who was a converted wide receiver, like you said. Chris Ballard has history like that too. That was Darius Rush, also was a converted wide receiver into corner. So he's not against taking those guys. Your downside, I think, is he's young to the position, doesn't have a ton of experience, so maybe he's not a plug and play guy like you would like to have. And he's 24 years old already at this point, so a little bit older in terms of a rookie. And normally when you have an older rookie like that, you're looking for a ton of experience and of kind of a plug and play guy, and he's not quite that. But just in terms of that height, weight, speed, that pure potential that he has, I think that fits Lou Anarumo, that fits Chris Ballard, a lot like the theme we were talking about with Siobhan Ravel. I think he's going to be a better zone cover guy than a man cover guy, not quite as fluid in his hips, but again, that's something that we're going to get kind of a look at going into the combine, how he turns, how he twists, doing those drills where they're flipping their hips and chucking those deep balls. I think he's going to shine this next week, so I think this is a good one to include on the list, and for sure, I mean, double dipping on corner, especially if you've got a guy like Porter who you think might need a little bit of time to mature and learn the playbook and get in there and kind of grow in the position because he hasn't spent a lot of time there. Then yeah, double dipping I think would be a really good strategy if you're taking a guy like Porter.
Yeah, and he's not going to get beat deep. Mm-hmm. He's not going to get matched by. There's not going to be many wide receivers that are going to match this guy's speed. And something that actually sticks out, 2 things. We got somebody that, let's see, where is it at? Yeah, so DSG Goodbar, late round drafts are lottery tickets anyway. I don't think that he's going to be a late round pick. I think that you're talking about him being a day 2 guy. Mm-hmm. Second or third round, I think, is what fits him. Might be more of a special teams guy at first. Well, guess what? One of his strengths, special teams maven with consistent production as a gunner and a punt block specialist. 4 blocked punts show his game-changing ability. That is freaking impressive. Mm-hmm. 4 blocked punts, and then you're talking about 2024. This is his 6th season in college. He only had 18 tackles. He played 12 games, 2 tackles for loss still, and had 3 interceptions. I mean, the guy's got the ability, and one of his comps is Darius Rush. It's wild, but Darius Rush, Cam Hart from Notre Dame is another comp, which I know a lot of Colts fans really thought that could be a guy that they should have drafted. They didn't get a chance to him. And Kamal Haddon from Tennessee. Look, man, I think that this one makes a lot of sense because of the versatility. I think this one makes a lot of sense because while he doesn't have all of the experience of some of these other defensive backs. In fact, it's such a small amount of experience as a cornerback that
Mhm.
you're kind of a little bit like maybe taken off guard by it, but it's that ball of clay. You can mold this guy right from day one. You can bring him in. He's probably going to start on special teams, but who knows what you could turn this dude into? He's got the length, he's got the coverage ability, he's got the speed, he's got the breaking ability. He's going to be able to keep up with these faster receivers. He is going to be able to show you a lot. He's going to knock away passes, and he's going to be able to move his hips very well. Now, like Patrick mentioned, and we saw it earlier, hey, I got to say, he could get beat off in man coverage. He could get knocked off in man coverage. You don't want to see that too often, especially with what Lou Anarumo is trying to do. But I have to say, man, I really like what he might become. And I know that we've talked about what they might become, and sometimes that doesn't always work out. But I just think that this one makes a lot of sense. Of course, NFL nerd, cough, Alec Pierce jersey. We're waiting until a little bit closer to, I would say, the NFL draft. I'm going to start putting up jerseys behind me. Look, man, at the end of the day, I know I got a lot of crap for having that Alec Pierce jersey up, at my old house. I'm glad that I kept it. Let's just say that. Glad I didn't give it away to anybody. But yeah, and this is another good one from SCO. SCO, I'm not sure how to say your name. Thank you so much, my friend. Production over potential. Look, man, I get it. I absolutely get it. You want the shirt thing. You want a guy who has basically shown you enough in college. And this is a guy that when he played, I mean, his first 1, 2, 3 seasons out of 6, he was a wide receiver. Okay. And then he played defensive back 22, 23, 24. Didn't really have all the production, but he had a couple passes defended. It's just really what you might be able to turn this guy into, which is why you're not going to waste an early pick on him. I will say, though, if he's available in the 3rd round, maybe that's when you take him. I honestly wouldn't even be upset with them taking him in the 2nd round. I know that sounds crazy, but this is a guy who could turn into just an absolute hell of a player, especially if you get him some experience on special teams. So, but we'll go ahead and get to the last one here. Now, this is one of the top guys. Everybody's been talking about this guy. I think that, kind of like with Porter, you're going to see Porter really shine at the combine. I think this guy is also going to shine at the combine. He's arguably the top at his position. I know that Draft Buzz doesn't have it, but many others do. And I think that if certain players are gone at the point when the Colts select, I think this guy is almost a shoo-in, to be selected by the Indianapolis Colts, depending on how he performs at the combine. Noah, who's your last one?
Yeah, so this is going back to the position that we started with. So we're doing Malachi Starks, safety out of Georgia. Didn't realize I had 2 Georgia guys back to back. I'm sorry about that.
Hey, man, good players.
But no, we mentioned that Xavier Watts early on was kind of creeping into that safety one conversation, and Malachi Starks has really been that guy for most people. It's almost consensus that he's safety one in this class. But I mean, it's fitting that we're talking about 3 of them because of such a big need on this Colts roster. So I'm going to kind of take this opportunity with talking about Malachi Starks to kind of talk about all of them that we've talked about. This one, Malachi Starks and Xavier Watts, I think would both fit that free safety mold. They've both kind of moved around a little bit. Xavier Watts kind of moved around a little bit more than Starks did. But in terms of free safeties, I think those are the 2 that you're looking at. And then Eminware would be that strong safety guy. So, but I think Starks is that pure safety. We mentioned the Malik Hooker comp for someone like Xavier Watts. I think in terms of where the Colts are at in draft position and how they had to get a little bit lucky for Malik Hooker to fall, I think the same thing could happen with Malachi Starks, where he's kind of slated to go in that top 10 range. And if he falls to 14, I think the Colts would scoop him up, maybe even regardless of who else is left on the board. I think he's going to grade very highly for them and kind of fit into that role really well. And then you're going into the combine and you're kind of looking for what he's running and things like that. But I expect him to run better than a 4.5. But even when you're looking at those numbers, keeping this in mind for Xavier Watts also, depending on what he runs. Jesse Bates ran a 4.5 at the 40, and he was the best safety that Lou Anarumo's ever coached. So I don't think that necessarily, despite Chris Ballard's history of going for those high RAS guys and those high testers, which Eminwari is going to be. Even if a guy like Starks or Watts doesn't really test as well as you think that they're going to test, you would think you'd like to have a really high 40 speed when you're going for that rangy free safety that you're relying to cover the entire back end of the defense, no matter which side of the ball is getting beat deep. But I mean, if as long as you've got the instincts to play the position, with Starks and Watts both seem to have, and you're quick to make those reads and quick to make those decisions, then you have time to get over there and make up for anything that you might lack in speed. But I do expect Starks at least to test pretty well in that respect.
Yeah, I mean, 2023 All-American. He's got one of my favorite like profiles on NFL Draft Buzz. Shows advanced hand usage against blockers in the box, consistently creates separation with strong punch before shedding to make plays against the run. And then he's got elite change of direction and short area quickness that allows him to mirror backs in space, rarely gets caught flat-footed against cutbacks or bounce outs, shows natural hands and body control when playing the ball in the air, tracks it early and adjusts without losing speed. He's the complete safety. You're going to be able to play him as a free. You're going to be able to play him as a strong. This guy screams Lou Anarumo. He just does. I love the fact that Noah went back-to-back with Georgia players because they're both freaking awesome players. And, Patrick actually said something really funny. He's taking the Eagles' lead with all the Georgia guys. The Eagles just beat the living crap out of the Chiefs doing that draft strategy. They just decided to take all the best players they could. They didn't overthink it. It's weird, but they literally just like honed in on who's good, who's awesome, who sticks out the most. They used the combine, they used the draft. They had Quinyon Mitchell, and I think it was Jalix Hunt. I mean, they both just kicked so much ass as rookies. And it's just like, you look at that kind of thing and everybody's wanting to replicate it. But this is a safety that you can do so much with. He can play in the box. He can play in coverage. You're not going to be worried about this pick at all. I can't imagine this man not being at least somewhat successful in the NFL just because of what you saw in his 3 years at Georgia. I mean, I'm looking here and they're not like numbers that, if you're box score watching, stat watching, you're not going to be as blown away by Starks as some of these other guys. But I mean, he had 68, 52, 77 tackles, 2 interceptions, 3 interceptions, 1 interception, 7 passes defended, 7 passes defended, 3 passes defended. People are going to look at his 2024 and say, well, they're not as good as the other years. They really were. He still played fantastic football. I think that this one would be a home run hit. Do you think that Starks has the potential to really be the top dog, the top safety once the combine is completely over? I don't see why he couldn't be. I know Eminwari is an absolute monster, but I mean, Starks has been the consensus. Most people think that he's the top safety, and probably with good reason.
Yeah, I think he's had that crown for a while. I don't really see anything happening in the next 2 weeks that's going to really surprise people to the point that he falls down, unless there's something weird going on medically that they check in and find out at the combine, or anything kind of really off the radar that nobody's really expecting. I think all the numbers that he's going to put up are going to be respectable and not going to drop him anything if they don't raise him. I mean, there's still a chance that the way that he performs in the next 2 weeks kind of solidifies himself as a top 10 pick and kind of out of the Colts range.
Yeah, but regardless, that's everybody. And, I do have to say that it's going to be really interesting how all 10 of these guys test at the combine. They all fit Indianapolis. They all fit what the Colts might need. There's so much that Indianapolis has to do on defense, and a lot of it is depth. But my God, they need a starting safety. They need a starting, I would say, I mean, they absolutely have to have maybe 1 or 2 even starting cornerbacks. And then you need depth on the defensive interior. You probably still need depth on the edge because, look, you got to think about re-signing Dio Dengbo. You got to think about cutting Samson Ebukam. You got to think about, cutting Tyquan Lewis, for goodness sakes. I know that he's a homer, but, I mean, money talks in the NFL. And when you can save a whole bunch of it, it really talks. It starts yelling at you, and you have to let go of some of these guys. So there's going to be a lot of decisions the Colts have to make, and they're going to need to really pay attention next week at the combine with all 10 of these guys and more. But we're going to go ahead and get to, it's just a brief one, but it's a very important latest news and rumor, and that is the salary cap was increased from, this is just wild, it just keeps going, from $255.4 million to $277.5 all the way up to $281.5 million. The Colts are now around $35.24 million in cap space. given what some of these guys are probably going to be asking for, it might just be translating over to how expensive they are. It's kind of like when you take,
Yeah.
inflation happens, you keep a margin. It doesn't really change much. It just the price does. Um, this gives them a little bit more wiggle room. I still fully expect cuts to happen. But do you think that this basically says the Indianapolis Colts need to at least make a splash or two? And by splash, who the hell knows what that means with Ballard? But they need to at least make a splash or two in free agency with this new cap limit.
Yeah. So, I mean, I would say that most teams probably should have expected a little bit of a jump. Maybe this is a little bit larger than what they were thinking. It is nice to see that number go from around 27 to whatever we thought it was to around 35. So, they have that wiggle room to make that big signing and then still make the typical Chris Ballard type signings afterwards. Um, yeah, I mean, it just kind of goes back that I saw this in a tweet, and I wish I could remember who tweeted this out. But he was like, the smart teams were preparing for this, and we're ready to make the contracts that they're going to make with taking this into account. And the even smarter teams are counting next 2 years of it continue to going up, and they're going to keep being aggressive in free agency. I don't really expect that to be Chris Ballard's approach. I'm not saying he's not one of the smarter teams, but I mean, just in terms of the way that he approaches free agency, I'm not sure this is going to make too much of a difference. You did mention that maybe the contract numbers are going to go up for these guys because they know there's more money to go around, which I expect. But maybe in the next couple years we'll feel that a little bit more because there really hasn't been a lot of time for agents to adjust to this rising cap number this year. So I think people are still going to be asking for contracts that currently exist. And those benchmarks in terms of free agency. So I think, the further we get past these salary caps raising, we're going to see those contracts start to go up and it matter a little bit less that the cap's going up. But I still think we're early enough, at least with this big increase, that we're going to be able to see some tangible results across the NFL, if not for the Indianapolis Colts.
Yeah, and look, at the end of the day, they need to do something different in free agency because I if Ballard follows his typical approach to free agency, it's not going to go well. I just can't see it going well. You
Mm-hmm.
have to address multiple spots, and you can't just do it through the draft anymore because guess what? Lou Anarumo's scheme, a lot of this is going to be defensive, right? Unless you make some offensive depth signings, like maybe a running back line. If you do choose to bring in a backup tight end because you're pretty much going to lose Mo. You're probably going to lose Kylan. And that leaves Drew Ogletree and Will Mallory. One's a blocker and one guy hasn't done really much of anything. You really can't do that. You have to make some kind of splash on defense. Louis Anarumo's scheme is predicated not just on defensive backs and safeties, but also he likes his veterans. He likes guys that understand the NFL, and they typically do better. And I know we've talked that he's got to improve with those young guys, but you just cannot continue with the same philosophy. But anyway, that's our show. We really appreciate everybody joining in. This is such a critical time for the Colts. The scouts for Indianapolis, including Ballard, they're going to have to look at the combine closer than they've ever looked at it. They cannot miss in this draft because it might very well mean jobs getting cut at some point during this season. Who knows what could happen? This is such a tumultuous yet important and critical year for the future of the Indianapolis Colts. But like Horseshoe Huddle on Facebook, follow Indianapolis Colts on SI.com and on X on Colts or at Colts on SI. Subscribe to the Horseshoe Huddle on YouTube and click that bell to turn on the notifications. And of course, if you want to listen to us, audio only, subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen. We are going to be there. But what we're going to do is we're going to be right back here on Monday with some bold predictions. We're going to bring you some bold predictions. We feel like that's going to be something that's pretty exciting. It's going to be pre-combine, pre-draft bold predictions, but we might have to finagle the schedule a little bit because, of course, I'm going to be going down to Indianapolis to cover the combine near the end of the week. And, of course, Noah, he's going to be a part of that as well at some point. So if we have any schedule changes, we will let you know. But as always, everybody, please stay right in line with us. We're going to be bringing you all of the news, all of the coverage from the combine. And as always, Colts fans, enjoy your Thursday, enjoy your weekend, and we'll be talking to you first thing on Monday evening. Take care.